I think before getting into what happens, right, let's look at some data that just came out from the World Bank. It says that there are about 95 million people in Pakistan right now, roughly 40% of the population that are below the poverty line now. So that's the basic, thing that we need to be concerned about, is that not only is the poverty rate has been high in Pakistan, it was roughly 32% before this latest data came out. It is going up significantly due to the cost of living in an inflation crisis and the economic crisis in Pakistan. Now, what happens to a country and its political economy when these situations are sustained depends on the makeup and the infrastructure or the service delivery model in a country. So in Pakistan, we know that public level of healthcare and public level of education and public level of basic support is very minimal, meaning that people send their children or prefer to send their children, even if you are sort of in the second quintile of the income bucket, which is basically one would describe it as lower middle class. You try to send them to a semi-private school or some level of private healthcare, etc., is what you rely on as you begin to get out of the poverty line to have a better future for your children, which means that if economic adversity is sustained over a long period of time in a country like Pakistan, you begin to see erosion in terms of healthcare. First, by adults, because parents and others would try to eat less, for example, to feed their children. But then we know from data that Pakistan also has very high rates of child malnutrition and stunting. So that grows. So it's a generational loss begins to show up in the data in the long term. And also educational loss, because, for example, in 2007-8, from research that came out when there was a similar economic crisis in Pakistan, in that period, there were numerous examples of how parents would take their children out of semi-private schools because they couldn't afford that anymore. So there is a generational loss that begins to curtail future development due to economic adversity. It's due to nutrition and education primarily. But on the near-term side as well, you begin to see challenges emerge of a prolonged crisis, in the sense that you have productivity losses, lack of investment, for example, in infrastructure, where it is the government that plays a big role in Pakistan, meaning that when the government is then constrained, it would invest in the capital infrastructure expenses that are needed in Pakistan. So economic growth begins to struggle, and that creates a vicious cycle. So all in all, a country that goes through a prolonged cycle of economic adversity will begin to see erosion in generational gains that are supposed to reinforce each other over the long term. That begins to go away, especially in a country like Pakistan. And then in the near term also, you begin to see a vicious cycle emerge where declining ability to collect revenues, etc., or to drive growth from the private and the public side then leads to lower growth, which then reinforces the crisis that households are facing, which is what we're beginning to see now in Pakistan. And the World Bank's data today sort of reinforces that view in my mind, that this is a problem that Pakistan and its policymakers need to confront very quickly.